exciting time here at Twin Cities Orthopedics Performance Center as the Vikings named Brian Flores as their new defensive coordinator. And so now it's time to talk about it. And I've got former Vikings linebacker and radio sideline analyst Ben Leber here, as well as Ron Johnson, former NFL receiver and Fox 9 analyst. How you guys doing?
Great. How are you?
Great. I'm bringing a lot of energy. That was coming in hot. But
yeah, I like it because there's a lot to be excited about.
There is a lot to be excited about. I was actually my first question out of the gate was you guys were so excited, very vocal on Twitter about how you're feeling about the Flores hire. Why do you think it's such a home run, Ben?
I just think that he brings an attitude, and I think that's what this defense needs more than anything. Look, I know that there's schemes, there's X's and O's, but the defenses that at least I played on that were somewhat successful, there was just an attitude about it too. And so I think that he brings a reputation, experience, definitely the attitude, and I think that's more than anything else, that's what this team needs, at least defensively. So we'll figure out all the X's and O's and all the personnel later on, but I think this is a guy that guys can instantly respect, and the league is going to respect as well.
Ron, from what you know about Flores, what type of leader is this team getting?
Yeah, I mean, similar to Kevin O'Connell. You know, he's a connector of men. He's a guy that comes in and the players actually like being around him. Not to say they don't like being around Ed Donatel, but it's just different when you can actually connect with a coach, when you can just have a simple conversation with a coach. I think when you watch Kevin O'Connell and Kirk Cousins just talk life, you know, similar in age. You see Flores now can just sit and talk to Harrison Smith, or he can talk to Eric Kendricks. It's a different atmosphere. And I remember being in training camp and watching Justin Jefferson run around, looked like he was having a ton of fun. And the defense just looked like they were trying to figure things out. And if you're not flying around having fun and you're overthinking it, I think that's the problem. I think these guys are going to get back to flying around, having fun, you know, whatever, if it's music, whatever it is, but it's got to be that. Like, you've got to be excited, energy. It's got to be reckless abandon. I mean, I hate to say it, this is a brutal sport. The defense has to be reckless sometimes, and I just didn't feel like they were.
Yeah, and the thing to add to that is, you talk about the respect and all that stuff. You look on social media when he was hired, when it was officially hired by the Vikings, lots of players from the Dolphins and the Steelers came out and just tweeted out like words of support, words of love. We talk about that respect. He definitely earned it in all the stops that he's been in, and guys are very vocal about it.
Yeah.
That's such a great point. Just this morning, Cam Hayward was talking about how he's a student of the game and that he jokes and kids with Flores about odd things on the field, but those relationships can take a player coach very far within the season. And you talk about, Ron, earlier, the training camp and learning a new scheme. So much was made of a 4-3 switch to a 3-4. Now that Flores is in the building, going to get his hands on this scheme, what do you see happening?
I don't know. I don't know. I mean, my guess is a similar 3-4 look, but I talked to, and I'm not a defensive guy, but I talked to a couple people who played defense end and linebacker, Aiken Andale, Ben remembers Aiken, and simple guys like that. When you can be a tweener, you can be a DN or a linebacker. When you think about Zadarius and Daniil, there's still ways to show a 4-3 front, still have that 4-3 gap integrity, and still be able to say we're in a 3-4. Like, you can do those kind of things just by whether shifting the fronts, shifting an eye, you know, if I'm going to be head up on the center or I'm going to be shading the guard. I mean, there's all those little things like Cam Hayward said. Brian Flores is a student. You look at Belichick, you look at Tomlin, you look at the guys he learned from, you look at his Dolphins, like, they were terrible 2019. 2020, they were first and third down defense. So he understands how quickly to look at film, see the deficiencies, and say, look, this is all we have to do. And defense, it's not easy because you have to guess what the offense is doing, but there's only so many parts of the field you have to worry about. And I think that's where he's going to be a real help to this team. This is where we have to worry about. Cover this area. You cover this area. Let these guys get after the quarterback. I think that's going to be key. But he's an aggressive guy. So corners, this is what he needs. He needs corners, guys that can cover, and I think they have them.
Ben, when Kevin O'Connell was introduced, he did talk about changing it to a 3-4. How do you see his mindset changing with this hire of Flores?
Well, you look historically what Flores has done. You know, when they were winning championships in New England, they were a 3-4 defense. When he was in Miami as a head coach, and it was basically his defense, he was a 3-4 guy. You know, Pittsburgh has always been sort of known as a 3-4 system. So I'm guessing he's going to bring a lot of that 3-4 mentality here and kind of keep this scheme. But, you know, as the NFL is going right now, everybody knows that it is a sub-package nickel defense sort of league. Even our team last year, with Ed Donatel, we were 70% a four-man front because we were nickel defense so much. So only 30% in a true 3-4 defense. So we are going to get a hybrid look. You know, everybody wants to claim that there are multiple on defense, but I do think that the base of what he's going to run will be similar to what we saw last year.
When you think of the Dolphins as a defense under Flores, those 3 years he was there, they were the 4th highest blitz rate. And I know a lot of, if you scroll through Twitter, I mean, we're guilty of it. We scroll through Twitter and read fan comments. I think the lack of aggression was something that really bothered fans. How, as a coach, can you step that up, considering who Flores is, Ron?
I think Ben hit it on the head. Attitude, like when you walk into a field, you think about bullies, you think about the Ravens, you think about the Steelers. I just had Mel Blount on my show, and Mel Blount talked about they were bullies. Like, and you can't do what they did back then, but I mean, he said they would literally look at Jack Lambert and say, if this receiver comes across, just hit him. You know, like there's things you can do to create that, like, I don't want to go across the middle. I don't know if I want to do a 7-step drop because I don't have time. I think that's what the defense has to get. It has to be like, and I hate to say it, Zimmer had an attitude. Like, it was an attitude about that defense. It was we might lose a fight, but you're going to know you were in a fight. And I think at times, giving up 400 yards a game, the other team doesn't know you're in a fight. Like, the quarterback is like, this is like 7-on-7. And I think that's what's going to change. You're gonna see a little bit of that Steelers, Patriots mentality, come back to this Vikings defense.
Is that a good thing?
I think it's a great thing. I mean, as long as you can be successful with it. You brought up the blitz rate. I think the last 2 years that he was in Miami, they were at 40% blitz rate, pressure rate. Conversely, the Vikings last year at 19%.
Wow.
So, we're going to see, double the impact as far as the attitude and as far as the pressure, but also they got to the quarterback. That's the other thing. Like, you can't just pressure just to pressure and be like, oh, look at me. I'm a pressure guy. Like, I love bringing blitzes. It has to come to fruition. You have to get sacks. And they had the highest sack percentage in the 3 years that he was in Miami as well. And you look at the 3-year total, they hit the quarterback 300 times in that 3-year span. So that's 100 times that they just hit the quarterback. So they are going to harass, they're going to pressure, and look, I think that regardless of personnel, you can get guys, much like offensive linemen, they want to run block. It's easier to put your weight on your front of your toes and go forward. Same thing with defensive players. You don't have to have the best skill to be a blitzer. It's easy. Like, I don't have to drop in coverage. I don't have to read routes. I don't have to read the quarterback's eyes. I don't have to break when I see the quarterback throw. You're giving me a green light just to go. It doesn't take a ton of skill to do that. And if you can out-scheme people and get free blitzers, you certainly don't need a lot of talent to do that. So I think having a blitz-heavy, aggressive defense will maybe mitigate some of the personnel issues that we may have.
Well, you mentioned personnel. I was going to get to that next, so I'm glad you did that, because the Vikings do have 3 starters on defense who are free agents: Dalvin Tomlinson, Chandon Sullivan, Patrick Peterson. But there could be a lot of changes. What kind of roster changes do you foresee with Flores at the helm, Ron?
I say cornerback for sure. Like, you've got to solidify that and have backups. Like, you think about, like Ben said, the amount of nickel and even dime now that you're going to see. You look at what the Cowboys did with J-Ron Curse. They turned him into a free-range chicken almost. Just, you go out there and you just roam around the field, help us out where you see stuff, fill in as a linebacker. So I think from a cornerback standpoint, whether it's Peterson or Sullivan, my guess is Peterson probably really wants to stay. I could see them moving on from Chandon if he gets a better offer somewhere else. But 13-4, who doesn't want to stay for that if you feel like this defense can get better? And I think that's what Flores adds. He's going to add the piece of, like, guys might be willing to stay for Flores and make less money just to be in a scheme and a defense that they think can actually be good, when an offense you already know is really good. So I think that's where the changes are going to happen at that cornerback position. Dalvin Tomlinson, I think that's I not say a slam dunk, but you clearly know. You look at what the Eagles did with Linval Joseph and Ndamukong Suh. You bring in 2 run stoppers, and your defense, like, they were getting killed, and then all of a sudden now their defense with Hassan Reddick and the way they're getting after the quarterback. And one thing to think about too is T.J. Watt. You look at the Steelers. He led the league in pressures. He led the league, and it was pressures and QB pressures as well. So, and then also 17% of the time his pressure rate led the NFL. You look at what they did with the Steelers, and it was scheme. It was, how can I put this guy one-on-one with the guy we want him to have? And that's where Brian Flores is. I mean, he's learned from Mike Tomlin this year. That was the perfect situation to learn from, a team that gets after the quarterback in that defense. And so, again, T.J. Watt is a guy, but I think with Danielle Hunter and Zadarius Smith, you have 2 guys. And so he can find ways to get those guys freed up.
Yeah, Flores is known for his talent evaluation. Ben, so what are your thoughts on potential roster changes?
I think it's going to be, we talk about the pressure, and a lot of the pressure that he brings is not zone pressure, it's man pressure. So you're looking for guys that can cover one-on-one, whether it's linebackers and guys in the secondary. So you look at guys like Patrick Peterson, it might be tough. It might be tough to bring a guy like that guy back and fit him into the scheme, because I think his man coverage days his predominant coverage is, I think, kind of behind him. And the reason why he loved Ed Donatell's system is because he can use his intelligence, he can use his eyes, he can use his route recognition to jump routes. And he had a bunch of interceptions this year because of that, because he's more of a zone defender. I don't know if he's a man scheme and a blitz man cover type of guy. Dalvin Tomlinson, I would argue that early parts of the season, first third of the season, I thought he was the defensive MVP. I thought he played outstanding in both the run and the pass. He's a very sneaky pass rush guy from the inside. He is also going to cost a lot of money. So that's the other part of it, is when it comes to personnel, I think he'd be a great fit to stay in this scheme. He's the perfect type of guy that you want to stop the run and get off the passer if you need be from the inside. But we all know that we're kind of in a salary cap situation. So how important does he fit to what Flores wants? Does Flores really like him? Is it worth the investment? The money part of it's going to be a big deal.
Should be really interesting to watch that unfold. Also watching unfold the timeline of things. And I think in the society that we're in, we're like, we need change now. It's going to be overnight, right? But like, putting your analysis caps back on, what is a timeline? You were fourth most points, you allowed the second most points per game. What is the idea of a turnaround for this defense, Ben?
Well, I think even going back to last year, when we had the whole regime change and we're like so excited about Ed Donatell and what he's going to bring, all we talked about as a fan base is like, we have a lot of confidence that our offense is going to be good. And it has been good with Kirk Cousins for the last handful of years. Just don't be last. Like, be in the, like, we're like basically saying like, hey, we're going to give you a long leash on defense. Just be in the 18s, 19s. Maybe it's okay if you're in the early 20s. We can win with that. We can be competitive in the playoffs with that. So I think for this year, we know that there's going to be some challenges with Brian Flores and what he wants to put together. Just don't be 31st. Be like 19th. If you're like 19th in total defense, that's good football, knowing that our offense is going to be probably now a top 5 offense next year.
That's fair. You agree?
Yeah, I agree. And you look, I think Brian Flores too adds the fact that he was a head coach. So he understands it's not just my defense. How can I help Kevin O'Connell's offense out? How can I help get the quarterback back, or the ball back to Kirk Cousins? How can I, like Ben said, stay in the top 20? You don't have to be the best. You look at the Colts, when they won the Super Bowl, they had the 25th ranked defense. So you don't have to be the best. Just don't be the worst. And when they were 25th, to be honest, they were like points away from 19. So it wasn't a big gap between them and the top 15 teams, or the 15th team. But when you're 32, 31, you're giving up, like I said, 10 games of 400 yards. That's hard to win 13 games. And if you were to look at that defense and say, we have the 31st ranked defense, we gave up 400 yards 10 times, and we won 13 games, the math is not mathing. It doesn't add up.
Yeah.
The math ain't mathing. That's literally, because everybody said the Vikings were frauds. No, Kirk Cousins just was really good. Kevin O'Connell's offense was really good. The defense it was fundamentally, there were things, because the fact that the last game at Donatell said, I let the leaders take over this defense, you're going to like what you see. I didn't see anything different. So clearly it was fundamental. Something was not right. You don't have that many Pro Bowlers, but your defense is that bad. So I think it's just, and like Ben said, it's a mindset. I mean, honestly, offensive guys, we drink tea and coffee, we sit back and relax. Defensive guys drink
the offensive linemen don't.
Offensive
linemen, they're smashing beer cans.
Yeah, they do smash beer cans, they eat raw meat. But defense, it's gunpowder. You have to have a fire about you. You have to fly. Like Brian Dawkins, I saw him get interviewed this week. The best interview I've ever seen as far as just reckless abandon, meaning that he cared that much about his team that he was willing to sacrifice his body to make a play. And if you don't love your team that much and you don't love your coordinator that much, you're going to get some olays and I don't know if I'm going to stick my shoulder in there and make this play. I think we saw with Cam Dantzler, him almost tearing his leg apart trying to submarine a guy to get to a tackle. But you didn't see that a lot. You know, and I think that's what Brian Flores is going to be. It's attitude. Like, you can change the attitude quick. So your timeline, in my opinion, it's immediate. You can walk into a locker room immediate and find a guy like Ben Leber and say, hey, I need you to get in there, and I need you to do X, Y, and Z on this defense. I need you to, when I say go after the quarterback, just go. Like, don't worry about, like, a guy bubbling out. I got guys for the bubble. I got guys for the RPO. You go.
If you thought it was just Ben and Ron here to give our Flores reaction show some pizzazz, we've got Vikings radio analyst Pete Bursich to join along with a special guest to give us what he thinks Flores needs to do as he approaches this job week 1.
Overall, I'm extremely excited about the Brian Flores hire. In fact, even Odie up there is excited too. The main thing with Brian now, I'm surprised, number one, with the head coach considerations that he had in Denver, that he decided to stay and be a coordinator. I think that speaks volumes to what's going on here in Minnesota, the players that we have, the organization. The next best thing and the next big thing for him, evaluating all the position coaches. I'd like to see a lot of them stay, but it's personnel. And it's finding the right personnel. And it's not just through college, but also through free agency. He knows a lot of names. He's been around a lot of guys. And that's kind of the key. Not just, there's some no-brainers out there. The high-dollar free agents, the first-round draft picks. It's those second-layer free agent guys and those third and later college draft picks are guys that need to fit the system. And Brian's been around a very, very long time. He knows what type of guys fit the system, so hopefully he can add a lot of talent all the way across the board.
Of course, our special guest Odie there in the background, who doesn't love a nice Zoom dog video.
If you want to amp up any video, just put a little 4-legged furry creature in there. And like, oh, I'm just going to like that. I'm going to like it. I'm going to like it.
Just makes you love Pete a little bit more.
Either dogs or kids in diapers running through the screen. One of the two. It always gets you.
And he does make some very good points. He needs to get in, Flores needs to get in, roster evaluation, go in and personnel and figure that kind of those things out. He also obviously mentioned looking at the assistant coaching staff and seeing what's going to fit for him, what's not going to fit for him. What would your first order of business be if you were Flores, Ben?
I think the first order of business is trying to figure out who your lieutenants are going to be. Who are your assistant coaches? Ron knows this. It's a small world. The NFL is a small world. Whether these guys have an actual personal connection to Flores or not, it takes one phone call to figure out, like, okay, who's this guy and who's this guy and what do you think? And so I think that the vetting out process of the assistant coaches that are on staff right now, I think that is priority number one. Then you get all those guys, you compile your team of guys that are going to filter out all that information. Then you figure out, okay, what do we have for talent? Where can we upgrade? What do I think about all these players? What do we have? You get with Rob Brzezinski and you get with your head coach and you figure out, okay, when it comes to contracts, where are you guys looking to invest? Can we invest more money in this free agent that maybe I have an eye on? So all of that stuff kind of, I think, comes after that you figure out who your assistants are.
And I think it helps that Flores is so connected within the NFL as well. He probably has several players he has in mind from his former teams, and he feels like he could punch into this Vikings lineup. Ron, do you think?
And if you look at like any coach that of his caliber that knows I could be a head coach tomorrow, he has a list. I mean, old school people had Rolodexes. I'm pretty sure he's migrated to a computer, some file, but he has a list of guys, and he's kind of put like, hot, cold, and then like, I don't know this guy, but he always has a list of guys like cornerbacks coaches, linebackers, special teams coaches, all these guys that maybe he can snag. You look at Steelers guys, because of course lateral moves, the NFL tries not to let that happen, but I'm pretty sure there's some guys that he's worked with, Patriots, Steelers, Dolphins even, that he's like, I had this guy in mind. Hey, I just got the job with the Vikings. Would you be willing to come? And that's the first question. You don't just say, hey, come.
Right.
Would you? And then you have, like Ben said, you meet with the coaches here too. You still sit down with all the coaches here and you kind of figure one by one whether it's going to coffee somewhere or, I don't know who the coffee sponsor is. I don't want to throw a sponsor out there, but, you go have coffee somewhere. And then you have that conversation though. It could be upstairs in the diner, but you have to have those conversations too to make sure, kind of like Kevin O'Connell with Keenan McCardale, same thing, Keenan was already here. He met with Keenan. Hey, you're a great fit for this team. I think that's what Brian Flores is going to do. And then from Ben's point, it's salary cap. That's the first thing. And then if it's like, I need a man corner, you spend your money on a man corner. I think, look at the Patriots, not say no-name guys, but Patriots guys they had up front in that front seven that they just figured out ways to make it work. But who they have? Stephon Gilmore. You look at some of those other corners. You got to find you a guy. If Patrick Peterson's not that guy anymore, you go find you one that can really just be I hate to say it, all roads closed. You got to find that guy who can shut the roads down.
Well, now that the decision is made, as Brian Flores is the new defensive coordinator, the real work begins, as you guys said, and Kevin O'Connell and his staff will obviously get to it. Thank you so much for tuning into this. Thank you to Ben Leber and Ron Johnson for being here today. And stick to Vikings.com or the Vikings app for the latest as we introduce Brian Flores to the Minnesota Vikings.